welcome to ET Studio presents Future Brands of India in association with ET Retail. I'm your host for this episode, Shilpa Ratnam, and we have a very special guest. Say hello to Mr. Nissan Joseph, who's the CEO of Metro Brands. Hello and welcome, sir.
Thank you, Shilpa.
Now, you probably know Metro Brands as Metro Shoes, but now they've rebranded and they've repositioned themselves as Metro Brands. So, do tell us what this entire change means and what has actually changed at Metro.
Yeah, so I think what happened is over the years as we evolved, we opened up other brands such as Mochi and then Walkway subsequently. So what we found was after 50 years in the business, we had a stable of brands underneath our umbrella. So we needed a name for the umbrella, and that became Metro Brands because it made more sense, because Metro is our flagship, it's our oldest brand. So we took that and said, so we have Metro Brands, which is a corporate name, and then we have Metro Shoes, which is one of our many banners that we have.
And we've always noticed Metro and Mochi as part of a cluster, and that is part of your cluster retail plan of expansion as well. But it's always been a sort of like a little, did you know that Mochi and Metro, were part of the same brand? But now, in fact, you have so many more partnerships. You have Crocs, you have Feel Up Indian rights, the rights for the Italian brand. Then you also stock Birkenstock. You have FitFlop as well. Talk to us about Metro, which has always been an Indian brand, now having an international outlook.
Yeah, so I think it evolved over a period of time. We started off with Metro and Mochi for many, many, many years. And it was somewhere late in the middle of 2010, 2015 that we started branching out and taking on international brands. And the first one we took on was Crocs. And that did very well for us. And then subsequently, we went out and got Fila. And these are distribution or licensing rights, right? Depending on who the brand is. And what we found was we do it from a customer backward point of view. So when we see customers gravitating towards a product that we cannot do or we cannot make or have the same brand salience as that product has, and a good example is Crocs. They've done an outstanding job in bringing that brand to India. We bring them into our stores to make sure that our customers in our Metro, in our Mochi, have a great one-stop shop, right? The Fila acquisition really came by because as we look to the future, we see a big need for us to get into the sports space. India is still at a very nascent stage when it comes to sports adoption, but that's going to change if you look at anywhere else globally. And we're already seeing that. You see some of the top marathon runners in Asia coming from India. I mean, these are things that are happening all the time. We're winning more gold medals. We're winning more silver medals out there in different sports. So this is going to evolve, and that's why we went out and got Fila. And then, of course, it was a privilege to get the license agreement for Foot Locker, who's a premium multi-brand footwear retailer in the world.
Now, so when it comes to trends, do you find India mirroring those elsewhere across the world?
Yeah, I think the trends are very much in sync with the rest of the world. I think the intensity of that trend is different, right? So, I'll use sports as an example. The intensity of the sports trend, the intensity of athleisure is just coming to India. We were still a pretty black and brown kind of a nation till about 5 years ago, pre-COVID. Today, you see it much more casual. Today, you even see sneakers at weddings. But this has been going on, this casualization, this athleisure shift has been happening globally much before us, right? But I think so we're on trend in the sense that we are adopting more athleisure looks, we're adopting more casual looks, but we're not as on it as the rest of the world is. So, we're not off trend by any means, but we're not like when I used to grow up. I think the songs were 10 years old by the time I heard them, right? So we're not that far off. We're definitely on pace. In music, as you can tell, we're right there with the world scene in music. We're right there in the world scene in dance and hip hop and skateboarding. So it's all there. India is really on the cusp of being an explosive country in terms of actually maybe even setting the trend at some point, as you see with some of the Bollywood songs that have made it globally.
And when it comes to footwear specifically, do you find that the market here still has potential for saturation?
Yeah. So the potential comes from a number of factors, right? So factor number one is the average footwear consumption in India per capita is 1.9 roughly, right? Which is one of the lowest in the world, right? As that improves, you just get that natural lift of more shoes and footwear being sold. So that's number one. Number two, there's a huge unorganized sector. And, the unorganized sector is not usually able to capitalize on all the demand out there, right? So almost 70% of our business is coming from the unorganized sector in footwear. As that migrates, they get into organized footwear. And the third thing is the premiumization of India, right? As incomes rise, affluence rises, so do aspirations, and people want aspirational products. So we see the opportunity for growth for premium, well-made shoes and footwear to have quite the growth path ahead.
Especially with disposable incomes increasing in not just tier 1 but also tier 2 and tier 3 cities, we see a lot of brands focusing on expansion there, and yours being an aspirational brand, value having that, what are your plans for tier 2 and tier 3 cities?
Yeah, so when you look at the landscape out there, we're in about 185 cities. And I think India has the potential for us to be in about 300 to 400 cities, right? So that's first and foremost. And in those 300 to 400 cities, we would have multiple formats. We would have a metro and a mochi. We would have a metro and a walkway. Some of them will take on Crocs. Some of them will take on FitFlops. Some of them will take on Foot Lockers, especially in the metro cities, right? So the opportunity for growth is not just restricted to tier 2 and tier 3. It also exists in metro cities through our Foot Locker chain and our Fila chain, but it also is tier 2 and tier 3. But to speak specifically, Shilpa, towards tier 2 and tier 3, we forecast that they're going to be the hotbed for growth, right? I mean, you look at Mumbai, and there's not much room for us to grow beyond this. We're bursting at the seams as it is, and you can dig up more roads all you want. It's not going to get much better in terms of actual accommodation and living here. But we see whether it's a Pune or whether it's a Hyderabad or a Nagpur having intense opportunities. So these not that I mentioned tier 2 towns, but behind them are the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities that have exponential growth opportunities as we move out to the hinterland, right? I remember I grew up in Delhi 20 years ago. Gurgaon was a field. Absolute field. And today it was farmland. And today it is just a bustling community, right? The same thing's going to happen in multiple places in India as the population expands.
Now, when you open these stores in these cities, I also want to talk about the e-commerce. I'm guessing a lot of the consumption when it comes to e-commerce is from the tier 1 cities. With the opening of these stores, do you hope to have a multi-channel and an omni-channel growth in these cities too?
So interestingly, the e-commerce sales are much more distributed than our existing stores right? Across India. And actually, we use it as an indicator of where there might be demand, latent demand that's unmet by us, right? So that is one factor. Of course, it would be unfair to say that it's all metro cities. The population of India is in metro cities, right? It's not outside of metro cities. So yes, there is a disproportionate skewing towards the metro cities. However, we do see a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 towns shopping on us. And that's very important because they don't have access to the product. I think we see it as they don't have access to it. Having said that, I think consumers continue to show a favoritism to shop for footwear, specifically in a brick and mortar.
Yes.
Over e-commerce, right? And part of it is, the whole sizing issue is a big problem, and every style fits a little differently. Some styles may not even fit you, as you well know. So that makes people want to be actually in a brick and mortar store to try it out. But most of them start their digital journey first. They do the exploration digitally, what am I looking for, or they get the inspiration digitally through influencers or wherever their source of fashion cues are, and then they bring it to the offline world. So we're very digitally tuned, while almost 90% of our sales comes from our brick and mortar stores.
And when it comes to your digital channels, right, I'm sure you've seen a huge shift pre and post pandemic. So do talk us through your learnings from that time.
Yeah, I think we all saw the shift to e-commerce during the pandemic, right? There was no hiding it. You didn't have any choice, right? And I think we were all as retailers wondering, does this represent a thought shift, a process shift, and people would now migrate and migrate from shopping in stores to the convenience of e-commerce, right? We've not found that to be true. They were only shopping e-commerce with that blip because that was the only place they could shop at that time. People still enjoy the experience of shopping. People still enjoy the consumer experience that happens in retail stores. People still enjoy seeing a multitude of choices without having to swipe left or swipe right or whatever you have to do to go through it, right? So they enjoy that whole concept. And, at the end of it all, having a cup of coffee with a friend on Zoom is nowhere close to having a cup of coffee with a friend in real life, right? And that's the whole point. It's not much different in shopping is what we're finding out, which is great. Having said that, though, e-commerce didn't go away. It didn't back down. It continued to grow. So it was incremental to to our overall sales. So that was a good thing that came out of COVID.
So you didn't see a dip necessarily
Correct.
after, after things opened up. You're saying it's still been on a growth a curve when it
Correct.
comes to e-commerce.
Exactly, because more and more consumers are much more comfortable with e-commerce after COVID, and that may not be buying our products before COVID. So we've actually opened up the pool of consumers much more significantly after COVID using e-commerce. So that's why I think it's not been cannibalistic to us. Then, of course, there was a whole rush of pent-up buying, and people like, they call it revenge shopping.
Revenge shopping.
Yeah, pent-up buying, wardrobe refreshes.
So did that work for you?
Oh, it worked too well for us, and I think we've been trying to tell the people that watch our business that this is going to be a little bit more of a normalization year for all of us retail. You've seen the retail numbers coming out right now seem to be quite muted. Well, it's not muted. We're just going against these incredible sales. It's like going against Christmas, in the middle of on a Tuesday in March. You're never going to make the same numbers, right? But overall, I think the trend has been we're seeing an increased level of premiumization in the consumer and appreciation for good things. I think one of the things COVID did was, two significant things I think it did. One was, I'm not going to have a lot of crap sitting around my house. If I'm going to have stuff, it's going to be some nice stuff, right? You just got tired of seeing all the crap and you said, why did I ever buy this stuff?
And especially shoes, you weren't wearing them for some time and you found out that the ones that were falling apart were not necessarily those are the best quality.
Right? Yeah. And then the other thing I think is, people put a much higher premium on comfort. They said, I'm going to be comfortable both with who I am, but also in what I am, right? So if I'm in shoes, whether I'm in clothes, and you've seen this whole shift now, right? It's almost like you could use COVID in India as a tipping point to when we went from real black and brown shoes to work, and now it's like, maybe I can get by with a triple black athletic shoe and nobody will notice, right? And when I buy a formal dress shoe, I want it to be comfortable. And when I go dancing at a wedding, you know what? Who cares? I'm going to wear sneakers with glitter on it, wink, wink, and I'm going to dance the night away at the wedding.
Well, absolutely. Staying on e-commerce, to see the kind of growth that you have, there must have been some innovation involved. So when it comes to innovation on the tech side, what did you concentrate on and what sort of results has that yielded?
Yeah. So specific to e-commerce, I think one of the first things we had to do was get our database of consumers consolidated, right? So if you can see the journey, your consumer journey through the e-com channels, through your store channels, I think that's a huge factor in understanding consumer behavior, right? Before e-commerce, we really didn't see the need to connect the two, right? If you shopped offline, great. If you shopped online, great. But we didn't see the need to connect the two. Now we're starting to see how much that you need to integrate those two pieces of data. So that's number one. I think the constant push to evolve the relevance and the ease and the consumer journey on e-commerce is always a challenge, right? Because there's always something that can be tweaked. There's always a bug that comes in. It's ongoing. And you and I have used sites that work perfectly. Then all of a sudden you go and instead of going to GPay, it goes to, the grooming hell, right? So this is a constant thing to keep up with technology there, right? The other thing that we're striving really hard to do is because we know it's important as search also, the personalization tools that we have to put into it to make sure that your journey is really more adapted to you is also significant. So we definitely, before COVID, we were sleepy on e-commerce, as is represented by our sales. Less than 2% of our sales came from e-commerce. Today, a little over 10%. So in those few years, we've had a 5-fold increase in our e-commerce business, and the rest of the business has grown too. It's not like the rest of the business didn't grow. So we've had some significant investments and growth that comes from our e-commerce channel.
And also your brick and mortar stores are seeing a lot of expansion as well. Talk us through the numbers.
Yeah, so when we went public in December of 2021, we said we would open up 260 stores in the next 3 years. We quickly upped that to 200 in 2 years, not 260 in 3 years. So it's a different pace. And we will close out this year exceeding that. And we're well on pace to hit the next year and hit the 100 stores for next year as well. What we're seeing is an intense opportunity for us to grow all our brands, all our banners, right? Whether it's Metro, Mochi, or Walkway, or Crocs, or FitFlop, we've seen immense opportunity to grow them. And also, I think in the last 5 years is when we as India have realized the great potential that faces this country, right? There's been comparisons to this is China back in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the China growth that happened from the 90s to the early 2000s, it was incredible. And people have come here and visited us and said, Bombay looks like Shanghai in the year 1990. And they're right. And I think so is our economy. Our economy is headed that way too. You know, people believe in India, there's not a brand in the world today worth their salt that doesn't have an India strategy. You know, that wasn't the case 5 years ago. People were like, India, we'll get to it someday. Today, it's like, what's our India strategy is what's being said in brands' boardrooms.
Now that you've spoken about strategy, I would love to know, what is your strategy for this year and perhaps the coming years? What are the trends that you foresee, and where do you think there is potential for growth?
Yeah, so let's start with the consumer backwards, right? Like everything we do is consumer backwards. So I think the sports category is going to be intense. And that goes even in our Metro and Mochi stores, right? In those stores, almost 15% of what I sell is athletic or is athletic footwear. Almost 60% of what I sell is casual, going back to my comment on the casualization of the country after COVID, right? So I see that trend as being very, very strong. I see the trend of the consumer expecting you to work really hard in the background so have a seamless experience in the foreground, right? So people always talk about how does tech come into the interaction with the customer when they're in the store. You know, I got to tell you, when I go to a store, the last thing I want to do is touch a screen. I didn't come all the way, you know, through the traffic, fight the parking, fight the crowds, just to touch a screen I can touch at home. I'm always a little irritated when they say, well, you know what, we can look at some other options. I go, no, I want to touch and feel the product, right? So people don't understand that tech is not about them. And there's been retailers that have tried VR goggles and swipe screens, and people leave them all collecting dust. What they want is a real life experience. They want the expertise of a salesperson to guide them through their customer journey. They want the service of a salesperson to help them make that decision. They want to be shown choices that they would navigate to on the website, but this salesperson has figured it out. And they want to be treated like they're special, right? All that takes a lot of tech in the background. And let me start off with, you know, making sure we have the right assortments in the stores, right? You know, our store in Ghatkopar would behave very differently than a store in Gorakhpur, right? And you and I know the difference between the two, but the two sound the same, so you would assume they act the same, and they don't. Our store in Ghatkopar, let me stick with Ghatkopar, is very different than our store in Linking Road, though they're not that far apart as the crow flies, right? It's a totally different catchment area. Understanding that, using machine learning, using AI tools for assortments, ensuring that you have seamless replenishment systems in place. I mean, it's a whole host of technology that goes behind. So when you walk into the Ghatkopar store, you're seeing what's relevant and important to you. And that, to me, is the ultimate customer journey, right? Nothing's worse. It puts companies out of business when you walk in and you don't find what you want. It's called Blockbuster. I remember they went out of business because you'd go in, you'd never find anything you wanted, right? So I think it's important to understand how to use technology so it's a seamless experience for the customer.
Well, you've adopted technology, but you also understand the importance of the tactile approach, which is why, you know, all this expansion of your offline retail stores. So in a similar vein, this is a legacy brand. You've been around for so many years, but you also managed to have a large part of the market share, which means you are keeping up with trends, you are keeping up with the changing fashion. How do you do that? You know, because you are somebody who believes in the legacy patterns as well. And how do you have a future-looking outlook?
Yeah. So I think it's, first of all, our legacy is not about shoes. Our legacy is about customer service, right? We're always focused on customer service first. And that service is not just about how well we serve you when you come to the store, but how well we're taking care of your footwear wardrobe needs. So that is truly the legacy of Metro Brands. It is not we sell shoes, you know, it's really we serve you and we serve your footwear needs, right? So with that, we use everything as a customer backward. And that's the legacy we have to protect as we go forward. And we're going to protect that legacy by making sure we're relevant in relevant markets, in markets that are differentiated, that we're relevant as times change and evolve, that we stay relevant there as well. And I think that's how we're going to build that legacy and look to the future. But if you also but to be also honest, on the other hand, we do look at fashion trends globally. We're acutely aware of what's happening, whether it's really high, chunky sneakers, obnoxious-looking shoes that eventually make it to mainstream. We are aware of trends and colors that are happening in the global scene, because what happens globally pretty much happens in India very quickly now. We don't have this
lag that used to be earlier, because your cousins had to bring you those.
Forget cousins. I see it on Insta.
Yeah, exactly.
Your cousins send it to you on Insta. I see it and I go, I want it. And then the next thing you know, we're trying to figure out how to get it into the country, right? So it is an exciting time that to be digitally connected, but it also puts a lot of pressure on us, because people will walk in and ask us for brands. I know about them, but I can't get them into India, right? And that's frustrating. And then they look at me like I'm a dope because I can't get the brand. And well, they're just not ready to come into India yet. Right?
Yet being the operative word.
Exactly.
So can we assume that there are more partnerships in the offing?
You know what? You can assume as long as customers want different things, we're going to do our darndest to take care of them. And if that involves getting additional partnerships, then that's what we'll do. If it involves us evolving how our assortment mix looks in our stores, that's what we'll do. If it involves us finding different sources of manufacturing, that's what we'll do. We're trying to stay agile to it. We're not fixated on things. We're not fixated that I want more partners, I want more this, I want more that. I'm fixated on one thing, and this whole company, the entire team, is on satisfying that customer that walks into our store.
Okay, so not even goal-oriented, but customer-oriented specifically.
Correct. Very intensely customer-oriented.
All right. You can't come out on top without, crossing a few hurdles. So along your way, I'm sure there were many challenges. If you could tell us about something more recent that you could overcome and that you're proud of, and just, because it'd be too easy for you, I'm going to eliminate the pandemic, right? So we already spoke about that. Yeah. Okay, so we won't speak about that. So, but any other challenge that you feel others can also learn from?
I think the challenge in retail is many-fold, right? But right now, I think the challenge is how do you use the technology that's just bursting out around you, right? You have AI, you have machine learning, you have robotic programming, robotic process automation. You have so many different technologies, RFID. You have all these things bursting around you. All of them add value to your business, right? And it's very challenging to figure out which one means something to you, which one's going to add long-term value, short-term value, shareholder value to the whole equation. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is when you do prioritize and decide how you're going to do it, the integration is a nightmare, right? Because we have so many different technologies. You have a store register, we call it POS, store register technology. You have a back-end enterprise technology. You might have a warehouse management technology. You might have a freight technology. Integrating everybody and make sure it all speaks to each other, and then making sure that no bug got into the system is very challenging. Recently we tried to do a warehouse management system integration, and it was, nicely put, it was a disaster. It was a total disaster, and I think we even talked about it on our last earnings call, how it disrupted our sales in the e-commerce world, right? But these things aren't like, oh, here's a magic formula and Superman flew in and solved it. It's just a team working endless hours, working night after night, working weekends, trying to find it, solve it, test it, launch it. They will test it, they will roll it out, they will monitor it, then they'll test it again if there's any flaws. It's just, retail is just this constant drumbeat of staying on it. I wish there was some magic moments. I wish there was a moment we won the Super Bowl or we won the World Championship cricket or something. There ain't any such thing. If there is, guess what? You wake up in the morning and a new day starts. That's retail for you.
But from what you said, what I understand is that there was a lot of hard work that went into ironing that problem out, that nightmare out. So you said there are no magic moments, but I'm sure there have been some bright spots.
Well, I think a bright spot for us was getting the Foot Locker license, right? Because I think when you get the premium multi-brand footwear retailer in the world to say, yes, we want you to be the licensed partner for India, that's quite a joyous moment, though the work just started at that point, by the way, right? But, I think that's a big win for us, I think a win for us is when we are able to really solve customers' problems, right? So we have a store called BioFoot. If you have heel pain, if you have any kind of foot problems, plantar fasciitis, You go in there, they scan you, they diagnose you, they take care of you. They even make you customized insoles to solve your problem. To us, that's very satisfying, right? Because our goal is to get everyone on their feet, one way or another.
That's great to hear. I'm going to look that up again. Can you tell me the name of that?
Biofoot at
Biofoot.
Colaba. It's right over our Colaba metro store.
Oh,
Can't
all
miss
right.
it. Yep.
You know, that's what I mean. You have so many brands, multi-brand, multi-channel, and you have something for every price point. And now it looks like you have something for every ailment as
Correct.
well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We want to be shoe specialists. We want to be foot specialists in terms of footwear, right? Now, we don't want to be orthopedic surgeons of any kind. We just want to make sure we can take care. If you need a shoe, we want to make sure one of our banners will take care of you.
Okay, so you want to be the great Indian shoe.
That's right.
Or selling the great Indian
The great Indian shoe retailer.
Shoe retailer.
Yeah, not just the great Indian retailer. I mean, there are many great Indian retailers.
Absolutely.
You know, we'd like to be the great Indian shoe retailer for sure.
You know, that's a perfect segue for me to announce that our Great Indian Retail Summit is happening on the 15th and the 16th of February. So do attend it. It is going to be a landmark event. And we will be discussing a lot of trends there. And so with you, with your rich experience, I would love for you to tell us what is a shoe trend that you see globally, perhaps, or in the footwear business that you think is poised to take over, not just India, but the world?
Well, I think there's a lot. I wish it was just one. I could go home and get a weekend off, right? I think there's a lot of different trends. I think trend number one is comfort. 100% is comfort, right? Trend number two is personalization. Right? People want more of a personalized, unique experience, right? And you know, I would say trend number three, if there was one, is colors. Colors are just booming, right? You see crazier and crazier colors out there on footwear, crazier combinations. You know, I remember as a kid, I took my canvas shoes and I painted every panel a different color, and people thought I was crazy. Right?
Okay, now you could sell that for like a lot of money.
I could sell that for 10,000-15,000 rupees. You know, I was just a little out of my time. You know, but
ahead of your time, absolutely.
I wouldn't want to say that, but you know, the whole point is there's so many trends happening. You know, elevation is a big thing. You see the big chunky soles coming out. Overall, though, what it's telling me is people are excited about their shoes. They just don't see it as something to throw on and walk out the door. They see it as something I'm going to wear to define me. Something I'm going to wear it for the moments that matter in my life.
Absolutely. Now they want their personality to speak through their shoes as well. And it's been great, speaking to you. I've got so many insights about the footwear industry, but also about the rich legacy that Metro holds and what's to come. Thank you so much for your valuable time,
Thank
sir.
you, Shilpa.
And thank you for watching. And for more such valuable insights into the top D2C brands, continue watching the future brands of India.